Now joining us, Brandon Vogel of HailVarsity.com. They cover the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Brandon, welcome to BYU Sports Nation.
Thanks a lot for having me, guys.
Brandon, you recently wrote a nice article, a preview of BYU. You talked a lot about different elements of BYU, an interesting perspective from the Nebraska side. You mentioned experience versus expectation. Can you explain a little bit about what you mentioned in the article with that in BYU and Nebraska?
Yeah, if you look at this game, I think BYU is sort of the known quantity here. Year 10 under Bronco Mendenhall versus Nebraska, which is obviously entering its first game under a new head coach. So BYU has plenty of expectations. I think they have a team that merits those expectations. But when you look at the experience angle in particular, we don't know a ton about Nebraska yet. It's going to be that sort of first game where we really start to find out about what Nebraska might look like under Mike Riley. What
do you know about Nebraska football right now?
Well, when you look at this team, they've got about 17 starters back. Most of their top playmakers on defense are back. They've got Malik Collins and Vincent Valentine, who are two very good defensive tackles. Nate Gary, in my opinion, is one of the better safeties in Big Ten. So I expect Nebraska to be pretty strong there. They're strong in special teams, got a good punter, kicker returning. And of course, DeMornay Pearsonell was an All-American punt returner a year ago. So they're good in the 2 out of the 3 phases. They might be able to buy themselves some time to sort of undergo this transition offensively.
Brandon, who is this game bigger for, BYU or Nebraska to come away with a win?
That's a really good question. Nebraska obviously doesn't want to drop its first game under Mike Riley, but I would probably go with BYU just because there seems to be, rightly or wrongly, this extra hurdle for an independent team to sort of impress on a week in and week out basis. You know, if a team ends up 9-3 in the SEC West, like Ole Miss did last year, no one sort of questions how good that team is. Or if you go 10-2, like Michigan State did in the Big Ten. We haven't seen an independent really force that issue in the playoff era yet. It's only been 1 year. So I just think, and I don't necessarily think this is fair, but when you look at a national perception, there's a little bit more impetus to sort of keep those games and keep those wins coming when you don't have a Power 5 conference.
And that's fair. And from your perspective, how many wins does BYU need to be relevant nationally, given they are an independent?
Well, against this schedule, I think 9-3 would be what you have to sort of get recognized from all the people who are trying to consume all of college football, which is a difficult task. I think if BYU ends up 8-4 with this schedule, that's certainly a top 25 team in my mind. Who knows if the actual voters would go along with that, but that's sort of how I see BYU looking this season, and it wouldn't surprise me if they ended up right in that range.
Brandon, what if BYU goes 10-2? Do you think that they have a chance in making it to a New Year's Six?
I think they should have more than a chance. I think at 10-2, they should definitely be in. The question is, you saw it with the Big 12 last year. They're basically trying to rewrite the rules to get that 13th game and another chance to impress. BYU wouldn't have that, of course, but at 10-2 with wins over some combination of Nebraska, UCLA, Michigan, Boise, Missouri's also in there, and then some good Group of 5 teams in Cincinnati and ECU. That's a brutal schedule. If you go 10-2 against that, you should be playing on New Year's Day.
Brandon Vogel of HailVarsity.com is our guest on BYU Sports Nation. He covers the Nebraska Cornhuskers. As we look at this game with BYU and Nebraska, which is being talked about for a long time since it's game 1, it seems like game 2 we don't really look at. We just look at game 1, and we count down every day. Where's a spot where BYU may have an advantage over Nebraska in your mind?
I think there's one key one, and that's BYU's defense, particularly its run defense, was very strong a year ago. Has been really strong under Mendenhall really for like the last 4 or 5 years, which is about as far back as I looked. Nebraska's got some questions at running back with Abir Abdul-Lagan. They got talent there. None of them's been sort of the main guy. If they're struggling to run the ball, that puts a lot of pressure on that pass defense, where Nebraska's going to be transitioning to some more pro-style concepts. Tommy Armstrong Jr., the presumed quarterback, completes about 52% of his passes. So if Nebraska has to pass a lot to win that game, they could be in trouble.
When you look at the experience of Lincoln Memorial Stadium, the sellouts for, back to 62, I believe the number is. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Sellouts since 62. What kind of game day experience can fans expect, BYU fans, that show up in Lincoln on September 5th?
Very friendly. This game's going to be somewhat unique, in that it's going to have a big game atmosphere. Right in week one, which hasn't been the case really for Nebraska. They've haven't lost a season opener since 1985. Now, part of that's because Nebraska was very good for about 20 years there. Over the last decade or so, though, it's mostly because Nebraska's opened against Chattanooga or Western Kentucky, Florida Atlantic. BYU is not those teams. So I think there's a unique level of excitement for this one, just because it feels like a real football game instead of maybe just a warm-up to work your way into the season. I always tell opposing fans who are visiting Lincoln, don't worry about parking someplace where you can tailgate. Just get a spot in a garage or something, and then head towards the stadium. If you're wearing BYU colors, you'll be invited into as many tailgates as you want. Nebraska football fans love to talk with the opposing team's fans about football.
There you go. Should be fun for BYU fans. Our Twitter question today is this, Brandon. What could be the biggest win for BYU in the 2015 season? I said Nebraska. Brian said Missouri. What's your opinion of BYU's loaded schedule?
Oh, that's a really good one when you look at that schedule. UCLA is probably the best team on that schedule, at least based on what we think we know now. I would probably go with Missouri, though, just because of when it comes, back-to-back SEC East champions. That could be the game late in the season in Arrowhead Stadium where BYU really can sort of cement its place in the pecking order in 2015.
Absolutely. And even if BYU is struggling, that win would mean a lot.
I think so. I don't see a scenario where BYU's coming into that game maybe 4-6 or anything. So, even if it is a little bit closer to 500, that's an important game then for just bowl purposes.
Brandon, I picked Missouri because of just the sense of what have you done for me lately type of a deal with college football and analysts. Do you think if BYU beats a team like a UCLA that's ranked in the top 10 and UCLA ends up falling off towards the end of the season, maybe even pushed out of the top 25, how much weight and value does that game still carry for BYU towards the end of the season?
I think it carries maybe a little more than you might expect. That's the danger with those, and that's partially why I picked Missouri. We'll know what both teams in that game are at that point. But when you tally these things up, BYU goes on the road and beats UCLA, who's probably going to be in the top 15. What happens to UCLA after that isn't BYU's fault. So I still think they should get a good deal of credit for a win like that.
After game one, it will be go Nebraska either way. That's all I know. Brandon, we appreciate the time. Great stuff. You can check them out on hailvarsity.com. Thanks for the time.
Thanks a lot, guys.